ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मनोजवं मारुततुल्यवेगं जितेन्द्रियं बुद्धिमतां वरिष्ठं वातात्मजं वानरयूथमुख्यं श्रीरामदूतं शिरसा नमामि। कूजन्तं राम रामेति मधुरं मधुराक्षरम् आरुह्य कविता शाखां वन्दे वाल्मीकिकोकिलाम्। आपदामपहर्तारं दातारं सर्वसम्पदां लोकाभिरामं श्रीरामं भूयो भूयो नमाम्यहम्। दक्षिणे लक्ष्मणो यस्य वामे च जनकात्मजाः पुरतो मारुतिर्यस्य तं वन्दे रघुनन्दनम्। I'm so honored that you've taken the time to join us again for the next episode of Yuddha Kanda. On the northern shore of the ocean, Sri Ramachandra is suffering from extreme pangs of separation from his beloved Sita Devi. He is being encouraged and consoled by Lakshmana. However, it's hard, yet Sri Ramachandra is fixed in his duties. So he performs his Sandhya Vandanam just as the sun is setting. The monkeys, not one, not five, not 10, 1,000, million, billion, or more, are eagerly waiting for the next step of how they can cross over this ocean. All they're waiting is somehow we need to get to that side of the ocean and finish Ravana. The question is how to get there, though. It's at this point that the sun had set. Now, because Valmiki Rishi is a fantastic storyteller, he wants to give us the full picture. The camera moves towards Lanka. Now, it's not necessary this is exactly at the same point in time, but now we get to hear what's happening in Lanka. Our hero, Sri Hanumanji, has recently, few days ago, destroyed the entire Lanka, burnt it down to ashes, and made a complete mess of the place. Ravana wants to know what is to be done. So the verse begins with, this is chapter 6. Ravana is sitting in his court, surrounded by his advisors. I can't say well-wishers, advisors, because it's not necessary that all advisors are well-wishers, but advisors. And Ravana is considering, he's speaking up. He says, Lankayam tu kritam karma ghora danstra drishtavabhavyaham. He is examining that the entire Lanka has been made a complete mess. Rakshasendro Hanuman sta Shakrenav Shakreneva Mahatmana. So this great Hanuman, Valmiki is telling us, destroyed Lanka like Indra would destroy the Rakshasas. It's a complete mayhem and mess that he left behind. Abravit Abravit Rakshasan Sarvan Kriya Kinchidvan Mukha. This is a very important phrase. Ravana is saying that Hanuman came like Indra and destroyed my Lanka. And while he was speaking, Valmiki says, Abravid Rakshasan, Ravana is speaking to the Rakshasas, Sarvam, to all of them, but Kinchit Hriya Van Mukha. He became a little shy or embarrassed, but not too much, just a little. That embarrassment is Ravana had to bend his, I guess, 10 heads in shame that it is one Vanara that challenged and destroyed him like no other collective of the demigods, the Gandharvas, Yakshas, Kinnaras, Kimpurushas, whoever would come. Collectively, they couldn't even enter Lanka, but one Vanara. So naturally, it is embarrassing. Ravana is embarrassed. As I says, Kinchit Kriya, a little bit shy or embarrassed. He says, after all, he's only a monkey in size. But he entered this Lanka, destroyed it, and even saw Sita, the daughter of Janaka Maharaja. Tena, Tena Vana, Aramatrena Drashta Sita Janaki, Sita cha Janaki. He was able to see. And what did Hanuman do? He destroyed the 1,000 pillar hall, or there was a special auditorium, not auditorium, a special assembly hall, which had 1,000 pillars in it. And that was one of Ravana's prized possessions. That people like, oh, Ravana has 1,000 pillar assembly hall. Hanuman had completely broken it and destroyed it, reduced it to a pile of dust. Not only that, without any effort, he killed some of the topmost of my Rakshasas. Pravara Rakshasa Hataha. Pravara means one of the best. Rakshasa Hataha, finished them off. And shattered the entire city of Lanka. So, dear advisors, what is to be done now? What is the best approach we can take? Kim karishyami? What should we do? So I want your advice. So what would you advise me that we should do right now? And ultimately, what is it that we have to accomplish? What is our strategy? So please advise what is best for me. So I want to ask you, since we're all hearing Ramayana, what is the best advice any of us would give Ravana? Very simple answer. Return Sita Devi. That's the best for you, right? However, we'll find out if that's the advice he gets. So now Ravana gives a big speech on what a council of ministers should do, what kind of advice they should give, and who is the person whose intelligence is good that seeks advice. So there are two things. One is seeking advice, and the other one who is giving advice. In terms of acting or making a decision, sometimes we wonder how to make a decision. We will learn from the greatest learned Ravana. But there is a problem with Ravana, which may or may not happen with us. But Ravana is advising, or Ravana is speaking about three levels of people. Last 2 weeks ago, we heard about Ramchandra speaking about three levels of servants or students. Here, Ravana is going to speak about three levels of persons who are trying to make a decision. So he says, "Oh, great Rakshasas, I have heard the elders and superiors say that if you want to succeed in something, the first and foremost thing is that you should need good advice. It's not just enough that you have the mighty strength of arms and army and facilities and all the different means. What's more important is strategy. Good strategy, of course, needs good execution, but good strategy has to come from good advice. So, in the matter of Ramachandra, I am seeking all of your advice." And he says, Trividha Purusha Loke, Uttama, Adhama, Madhyama. There are three types of people: the Uttamas, the Madhyamas, and the Adhamas, the lowest. And it's very difficult to find the differences among them, but I will tell you what kind of person is Uttama first. So he says, a person who makes a decision after consulting with his ministers or well-wishers or advisors. We all have, or ideally should have in our life, someone that we think of as advisors. Then this person should also deliberate with his or her well-wishers. And those people are not just, oh, these are my friends, but they should have the characteristic of being uh, neutral, dispassionate, not just scratching your back and patting us and saying what we like to hear, but can tell us this is good for you, this is not good for you. So they feel neutral, and we shouldn't put them in a place where you'll be my friend if you tell me exactly what I'm looking for. Otherwise, you can't be my friend. So he says the person should be capable of giving good advice, but he goes to his well-wishers and advisors. Then he speaks to his friends and relatives who may have the common interest. And finally, he does whatever he does with some faith in God. Although he says Daivam. Now, here, Daivam, depending on who the person is, the meaning changes. For aspiring spiritualists like us, the word Daivam definitely means we have to have faith in Sri Ramachandra, Sri Krishna, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, your Ishtadeva, the Vishnu Tattva, that they will help us or give us the proper intelligence, the thinking capability, and the ability to execute what we want. But those who are not necessarily bhaktas, the word daivam can mean providence or the higher order arrangement of things. One who sees that beyond me, there is another force acting. And this is what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that for any action to happen, there are five factors: adhishtanam, karanam, cheshta, the person himself, and finally daivam, providence. The in the modern uh, woke languages, that the universe should align with you. We say descending mercy, ultimately Krishna's mercy. Sri Ramachandra's mercy is required. So Ravana is giving such amazing thoughts on how one should make a decision. Then he says the Madhyama person is one who tries to consider all the factors that might arise, that he might face it, and he strategizes all by himself, doesn't consult with anybody, doesn't deliberate the pros and cons with anybody, just on his own thinks, oh, this is my duty, that's what I need to accomplish, here I go. At least he's considering duty, therefore he's considered madhyama, but has no other wise counsel, especially in life altering decisions. And this is a big one. Ravana's life will be altered in the sense he won't have a life anymore. And then Ravana says somebody who doesn't consider the pros and cons, the merits and demerits, guna dosha, guna dosha, uh, anishchitya, doesn't really uh, consider different pictures. Just I felt like it, I did it. I at that point I thought it, I did it. I didn't pause, I didn't consider, hey, what's the consequence of my speech or my behavior? What is at stake here? Sometimes people will say and do things so much in a rash manner that they will even put that relationship at stake. They'll put something more valuable at stake to get something very, very paltry or small at that moment because it felt like it. I was pushed by that urge. And who has no faith in God, and he only considers, I will do it. He says such a person is called Naradhama. This is the lowest of the kind. Essentially, he's saying that one should not make a decision on one's own. One should have the good counsel of friends, well-wishers, advisors, who are friends in the sense not that they will be happy to tell us, oh, I think you're stepping on something really bad here. That's not favorable for you. Well, and he says, so before we get into this, let's consider. Here's the hypocrisy of Ravana, because now he's going to talk about how advisors should be. But we'll come to that. Let's consider Ravana's hypocrisy. Like people in this world, they speak here, but they live here. And that's natural. It is there. But a true saint or an evolved person is when this gap doesn't exist or is very, very small. That means how one speaks and how one lives. Something that, as a spiritualist, we all consider from time to time regularly is how much gap is there between what I speak and what I live. It should not be a surprise that there is gap. Nothing wrong with it. It's just to know. Oh, it tells me that I have some work to do. Because when we are speaking, let's say to an audience, we're speaking to others, our relatives and friends, we give advice at this level. But it is quite likely that we follow in our own lives somewhere here. For some, it may be here, this way, whatever, but somewhere there's a gap. And that gap is due to hypocrisy in a very blunt way. We might say, oh, well, I'm still not there, however it is. But generally, that is the Kali Yuga hypocrisy, that advice for someone is fully scriptural. Advice for myself is Ravana's hypocrisy is he's telling his ministers that Uttama, this is what he's telling them. I'm very Uttama because I'm speaking to all of you. I'm the best of the kind of persons who seeks advice. You're all my wishers. So what happened to Ravana's so-called Uttama quality when he went out to kidnap Sita Devi? We heard back in Aranyakanda, Ravana did not consult with anybody. He only talked to Maricha. And Maricha told him, "You're a fool. Don't go after Sita. Because I know Ramachandra. And I've been hit by him at least twice in the past. And the third time, I'm sure he won't be so forgiving. It'll be fatal for me and for you." So Ravana told Maricha, "Do or die. Either you do my bidding or I'm going to kill you." And Ravana, if you remember the verses, put on a mask, a disguise of sorts, did not tell any of his ministers, called his driver, and did not even take his famous chariot because it's so shining bright and big. Everybody will come to know he got a chariot yoked with donkeys. And in the quiet of the day, without anybody knowing, went on a very private mission. So, in fact, Ravana is this Adhama person who does not consider the merits and demerits, who does not have any faith in higher arrangement, who does not do things for his own benefit. He thinks he is, but it's very unbeneficial. Does not consider how it will impact the rest of his family. And he thinks, I will do it. So actually, Ravana is the Naradama, but he's speaking in a way that I am the Uttama here. And then he says to his ministers, well, even among advisors, there are the topmost advisors, the medium advisors, and the not so good advisors. Okay. He says, when all ministers consider scripture, Shastra, this fellow is talking about Shastra, uh, upon deliberation, all of them agree. It's not just majority agrees or many of them agrees, but there is a unanimous decision and they remain fixed on their decision. Such counsel is the best. Anybody who's worked in a group or a team knows that to come to a unanimous decision is not easy. So he says, it's not just they've come to unanimous decision, they've considered scripture. Because scripture lays now even in scripture we know there is so much of nuances, disagreements. One will say this situation somebody said like that, oh in that situation they said like that, but the ministers are very capable of discussing and coming to an unanimous decision. That is the best advice you can ever get, when they come to a unanimous decision. He said, but sometimes the ministers or the body of advisors may discuss. They may have different points of view, and somehow they come up with a majority decision. So what happens is somebody on that panel is not fully happy. But because that's the majority vote, they go with it. And so he says that's the mediocre type of counsel. And the third he says is when the body of advisors have so much differing opinions and they will hold on to their opinion and not budge at all. So there is no consensus, there is no sense of majority. And they said, like, I don't care. This is my view. This is what I'm going to stay on. And because of that, the advice that a person will get will be bad. Because there are so many differing views. It's not that people cannot have different views, but different views can become reconciled or there is a convergence point if they can see the ultimate objective. And for that ultimate objective, there may be more than one ways to get there. But the third type, he says, is that they are so fixed that this is how I think, was my advice, that they can't see something bigger, they can't see something a point of convergence, at least in the intentions or the bigger picture, such counsel will be very bad. In fact, a person gets hurt by it because this one says this, that one says this, someone else says something else. And so a person is left confused. So he says, therefore, all of you wise people, think it over calmly, properly, in a cool mind, and tell me what is the best course of action for me now. Because accompanied with thousands and thousands of Vanaras, Ramachandra is approaching the shore of the ocean and very soon might even show up in Lanka. And Lanka will be put under a siege. And this Rama is not some ordinary person. Ravana doesn't know personally about Ramachandra, but we can sense a little embarrassment and fear slowly. But he's in denial that he has some fear because he has heard from Maricha what Ramachandra is capable of doing. He has heard from Surpanaka and before that Akampana. And Akampana gave a full report that nobody in the entire Bharatavarsha would fight with Khara Trishiras and their 14 generals and 14,000 soldiers. Nobody. They all left them in Janastan and did not want to mess with things. Ramachandra alone, in a matter of 72 minutes, finished all 14,000 of them alone. They were all mighty warriors and they attacked him not one by one but simultaneously. They had encircled Ramachandra. Rama did not take even one step back and finished them up. So he has heard about it. Shurpanaka also told him, Tarunau, Rupa Sampannau, Sukumarau, Mahabalau. And then he has seen what one servant or representative of Ramachandra did to his entire Lanka. And Hanuman told him, you remember Vali, correct? One arrow finished Vali. Just one arrow from Ramachandra. It's not like they even had a fight. And this is the same Vali Ravana under his armpit and dipped in all the oceans while performing his daily puja. Ravana could not breathe. So now he's putting it all together. He says to him, Ramachandra is very worthy. Hmm. And he has his brother Lakshmana along with him, and they may easily, now he says, they may easily cross over the ocean. In fact, Ramachandra is such that he can dry the entire ocean up if required. Samudram uchchoshaya tivraya uchchoshayati viryena anyat karoti iva. He can dry up the ocean or do something else to easily come over. So please advise me what is the best thing to do. We don't have the time to go into what advice he gets, but you can guess. You can guess what advice, because just as Ravana is an Adhama, his ministers also, starting with Prahasta and a whole bunch of them, they also can't give him good advice because they're afraid that if they say something to Ravana, their own life will be in danger. So they don't advise Ravana. In fact, they give him the wrong advice, which we will hear, I think, next week. We will hear the advice. There's only one person who has the courage, the guts to stand up to Ravana, not because he is a competitor, because he genuinely loves Ravana, his own brother Vibhishana, who thinks that the best advice I can give my brother is something by which his life will be spared. The life of all of these Rakshasas will be spared because he has made a mistake. And I should be able to tell him, you made a mistake. Nobody else. There's a famous story of the emperor has no clothes. Because the emperor was an angry fellow, someone came and told him, oh, you have these clothes and these look beautiful. And there was actually no clothes. So the emperor was moving around naked. Uh, this was way to expose how the ministers all were yes men and could not give the emperor good advice. So a tailor comes in and says, I have the finest of silk, but it's a very special silk. It is so special and unique that it is not easily visible to the eye, but only great people can see it. So naturally, emperor thinks, I'm a great person. So he takes some measurements and moves his hands as if he's putting on some clothes to the emperor. Actually, there is nothing. So the emperor is walking around naked, thinking, I'm wearing the finest of silk. And so he asks his ministers, what do you think of this top coat? Oh, beautiful. What do you think of my pants? Oh, fantastic. They're glowing. They're such lovely colors. Except one who says, you're not wearing any clothes. You're naked. What? How dare you say that? All my ministers agree that I'm wearing something wonderful. But only one person had the courage to say, hello. And so here, Vibhishana is going to tell Ravana, look, you're naked. You're walking around like this. Not naked in the literal sense, but your ministers are only yes men because they're afraid of you. And I'm going to tell you something, which obviously I'm fast forwarding. Ravana does not like that advice. So that's where we're going to stop. Chapter 6. Let's see if there are any comments, reflections, questions. A good reflection is on the side of seeking advice, what kind of a person am I when I have to um, embark on some big decision? That's one side. And the other side is when somebody comes to me for advice, am I able to give advice, suggestion, views without fear or hesitation because they may not like it. It's not that we have to break someone's heart to give advice. Sometimes we can say, oh, that's great, but we might say it differently or help them genuinely. Is that possible? Can we do that? Is a reflection for us. You don't have to answer it here. It's a reflection. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments? I guess not.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu. Please accept my humble
Hare
obeisance.
Krishna.
Adarsh Prabhupada.
Please accept mine.
Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Please accept my humble obeisance. Adarsh Prabhupada. Prabhu, two things. Uh, First, you share that uh, what we speak and how we are living. There's a it's worth reflecting because sometimes it happens that what we speak we are not living. And why? My question is, or my doubt is, why we should do that? Why can't we leave it simple? If we are what we are, just express what we are. And why the people when sitting on the Vyasa asana, they speak according to the scriptures. I'm not judging anyone because you made a statement that it's easy to seek for advice or give advice to the other people based on the scripture, but I am far from that life. Uh, is it worth doing while in devotional service? Because the first thing in devotional is duplicity. We should not be duplicitous, right?
So a person is not intentionally duplicitous. It's not like I have to think, let me see how I can cheat people. Not necessarily. But there's always a gap between ideal and real. So it's when one is speaking to an audience, it is important to speak what the ideal is. A real may be different. Real is where, and it's important for the audience to know that this is the ideal, and we're all students, and to live at that ideal is an aspiration for us. There's no harm in that. That doesn't mean one should not speak the ideal. Uh, you take any verse, something that you just was thinking yesterday. Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. Bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtike. Nishta bhakti. We may speak that verse. I may speak that verse, but it's not necessarily that I'm living like that. Ideally, I want to come to that stage. But it doesn't mean that we don't speak that verse. It's also important to say, I'm not be there, but from what I have applied, I have learned this, and I have some way to go. There's always a gap between ideal and real. But what happens is when the hypocrisy or the unintentional or even unaware duplicity is when it comes to someone else, I measure them against the ideal. When it comes to me, I measure myself against the real. That is a problem. Now, why does everyone do it? Different strokes for different folks. Each person has their own uh, abhadrani, abhadra one, abhadrani multiple that has to work with and has to recognize for himself or herself what is it. It's not that you always have to speak, oh, I'm useless, I'm here, and that is not necessary either. It's very uh, disempowering. But there are no two standards. For others, I measure them against this standard. For myself, I measure against this standard. If
Yes, yes, yes.
anything, if at all, then you measure others at this standard and measure myself at this standard. And there is enough work to do. But it happens. It happens. Isn't Kali Yuga the age of quarrel and hypocrisy?
Yes, Prabhu. Makes sense. Clearly makes
Nobody
sense.
is immune to it.
Yes, nobody. So unintentional or unawareness of duplicity is allowable, but it should not be intentional. That's
I
my
mean,
first point.
allowable means if I'm not aware of something, I've eaten saag paneer. If there is spinach in my teeth and I'm talking, you can see it, but I can't see it unless someone tells me there is paneer stuck between your teeth. Not paneer, saag, spinach stuck between your teeth. Oh, thank you.
Or
Some
let's
things
put
are
this
only
way.
visible to others,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not visible to us.
So the
It's called blind spot.
so the blind spot. Okay. So the uh gross duplicity is not good, but subtle duplicity is there is always a chance of subtle duplicity in everyone. It's a very generic statement I'm
I
making right now.
mean,
Is it true?
this is Kali Yuga. But our job is not to find people's duplicity. Our job is to find our own.
No, I'm talking
That's
about
our job.
myself.
I'm talking
I'm
about
talking about
myself too, and I'm finding it.
yes.
It's easier to see in others. That's why when we are reading Ramayana, it is so easy. In fact, we will find ourselves, even a common person, to be far more intelligent than Ravana's advisors. That's because we are
Mm-hmm.
out of the scene. We are spectators, and when we are spectators, there is a little bit more neutrality and dispassionateness. Therefore, Krishna says, Udasinam. I'm far away, aloof from the situation. I'm objective. But when it comes to our own lives, When we are participants in the drama, then it's not easy to see.
Mhm. Prabhu, my last question following this question. So the spiritual masters, they are above the both subtle and gross capacity, right?
Continue your question. I don't want to say yes or no just like that.
That's my question. That's it.
There are grades of personalities, but it's not our job to find out a little duplicity meter or it's not our job. What's important is that they are connecting us to the Supreme Lord, and that's their function, and Krishna is guiding them. Who am I to say, oh, that's duplicity? Who am I to say? But I'm also not necessarily saying, oh, every person is, I mean, that's every person has their own journey. And are they performing their function properly? Answer is yes.
That is a very great statement. That's the job of a
Yeah,
spiritual
my
master.
job. Why isn't this the function of a spiritual master can be performed by
Anyone.
somebody here, somebody here, somebody here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that it's necessarily like that. It can be at different levels, up to different advice, different guidance, and then different person. You know this. It's not like I'm saying my spiritual master is somewhere here, or that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just speaking very, very uh,
Generic.
objectively. That's generic, that to be a guru doesn't have to be there. This is not right, not necessary.
Absolutely, Prabhu. And it makes so much. Thank you for simplifying this. I really appreciate this because my conception that if I'm getting instruction from someone like a level of spiritual master, he should, I'm sorry, I'm not judging anyone. He should be at the level that he should be free from duplicity of anything. He should be completely Shabd. What he was speaking from his mouth is Shabda Brahman.
And possibly, sure, nothing wrong with that. But I'm not going to say, first, let me make sure that that person is, and then I can take advice. That's not my job. There are other
Thank you.
factors that demonstrate to me that, wow, this is a person who has dedicated their life for such a period of time. They've lived like this, they speak like this, and not just when they're speaking, but I've seen living. I've had a recent, I guess, new insight in this verse, Bhagavati, that Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, and I'll share it, and we'll move on from you to someone else. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, there are two Bhagavatas, the book Bhagavata and the person Bhagavata. Yes, the word Bhagavata comes from the relationship with Bhagavan, because Srimad Bhagavatam is about the Supreme Lord. It is called Bhagavata. A devotee lives their life according to their relationship with the Lord and their connection, so they're called Bhagavata. That's one meaning. That's what we are aware of. I had this little light bulb go on. Maybe it's obvious to others. For me, it went on that Bhagavata, the person Bhagavata means in the book Bhagavata, there are shlokas and there are lessons and teachings. In the person Bhagavata, we are seeing the shlokas alive, and their life and speech is a teaching and lessons for us. So they're called moving Bhagavatas because their every act you can say is the shloka. They're living that shloka. It's not just text, it is alive. So they're called person Bhagavat. So our gurus are walking Srimad Bhagavatams. But it's not
Thank you,
necessary
Prabhu.
that every person who's performing the function of the guru is necessary to be there. It's not necessary. There are different grades of persons. Okay,
Thank you so much.
let's move on to see if someone else has any comment or questions. Just so that I don't disturb anybody, the reason I gave a generic answer is in the traditional system, every village had a Gurukula where the Grahastha person would have students, he would teach them the Vedas, he would teach them how to live life and then send them off into life. It's not necessarily that each one of them was an Uttama Bhagavata. It's not necessary. But have they imparted certain teachings? Yes. Have they been able to give them a realization higher than what the student has? Yes. Is it necessary there? Not necessary. That's the point. I'm not speaking about any person's individual spiritual master. It's not our job to measure them. Okay. Any other final question or thought?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I was thinking about Dhruva Maharaj when you were talking about advice. And so Dhruva Maharaj also got good advice. Meaning, you're saying that people uh, may get good advice, they may not be in a position to receive it. And maybe that's the reason why Ravana's ministers did not give him good advice. But in Dhruva Maharaj's case, he got good advice, he heard it, but yet he was not in a position to apply it at that point in time. So he expressed it. Ning, just wanted to like get your thoughts on the two. Like we are talking Ravana and then Dhruva Maharaj, meaning he also did not accept.
One, Dhruva is a little boy. So in between a little boy and almost a 50, 60,000-year-old Rakshasa who has 10 heads. There's a distinction there, number one. So that's a concession. It's a child. Number two, Dhruva did not say, I don't like your advice and walk away. The dialogue continued. And so same as Arjuna. Whatever advice is being given by the Supreme Lord himself, the Jagat Guru or Vishwa Guru, he couldn't take it. But it's not like the conversation ended just because he said no. The conversation continued up to the point where he says, Sarvam etad ritam manye yanmam vadashi keshava. It's a dialogue. It's not like the first advice you get, you say, thank you, going for it. There can be a dialogue. So I wouldn't necessarily put Dhruva in such a comparison because it's a still conversation going. He only met Narada once. So first, as soon as Narada said something, it's not like he said yes. Here's something even more, if you have to consider. Sri Ramachandra, when he was going to the forest, his guru, Vasishta, all the 8 great acharyas told him, don't go. He said, no, I'm going to the forest. Did Ramachandra not heed good advice? The answer is the advice was good. But they also knew that that advice has a tinge of their own need or whatever that Ramachandra stay with them. In fact, Javali also spoke something which is atheistic. And Ramachandra, wow, young boy, young man, told him, you're speaking atheism. And then Javali smiles and said, I just did it as a way to somehow or other keep you in Ayodhya. But they all knew Ramchandra will go. However, the lesson is that even when such advice is given, Ramachandra stuck with his principle that the promise made has to be kept. They are actually showing us how wonderful Ramachandra is, that he's hearing the advice, but he knows that that advice is a way of keeping him back in Ayodhya, but he has a higher purpose. So one may say Ramachandra did not heed advice. But that's not kind of advice we're talking about here. So it's not just a plain vanilla type. There is little layers of meaning in it. You will hear Ravana's advisors, what lovely advice they will give him. Okay, Stira?
Yes. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, we're going to end here unless there's a burning question. Goes away in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Thank you very much. We don't learn anything from Ravana necessarily, not what he speaks, or especially not what he does. But sometimes a negative example is very helpful. Just the way where Krishna says, or the Ishopanishad says, Vidyam avidyam cha tad vedo bhayam saha. One should look at good or knowledge and nations together. He says that in the Bhagavad Gita second chapter also. So it's important to have a comparison because we learn from both. Sometimes good positive examples are given to help us know what we should do. And sometimes from negative examples, we also learn what is not to be done. And finally, we should have the intelligence to see them together. And thanks to Sri Valmiki Muni, who after chanting the name of Rama for millions and millions of years, out of his compassion for the living beings, has put up this wonderful story. Of course, they're ultimately performing their pastimes, Sri Rama and Sita Devi and Lakshmana and Hanuman. And they bring in Ravana so that we learn how to live the way Ramachandra lived. In principle, who can live like Ramachandra, but live like how Ramachandra lived and not live like how Ravana lived. So both are teachings for us. And so we're very grateful for Valmiki Rishi. Ultimately, without Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita commentary, without Prabhupada's teachings, how would we know anything? How would we know anything? So our founder Acharya is very, very amazing. We're very extremely grateful that he's put put a purpose to life. He has given us direction, and along with direction, he has given us enough good counsel that we have a safe path back to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Sita Ram Lakshman Hanumanji. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sita Ram Lakshman Hanumanji ki jai.